Hello, and welcome on in, everybody. I hope you're all doing good. In today's video, we are going to be speaking about the Greg's Reversed Fate. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, why the hell would we be doing Greg's Reversed Fate when you have so many other weapons that you could choose from? But the reality of things are that people don't always have the best weapons. Not everyone has the Albion Cavalry gun, and not everyone has the Meta Enduring Legacy. But one of the weapons that quite a few people have crafted and put some time into in season 1 was the Greg's Reverse Fate. So chances are that there are going to be a lot more people that have this weapon, and it's actually not one of the meta weapons, but it can still be used in Purge. As always, we start off the video with speaking about the weapons, unique abilities, and the information around the weapon. So you have your usual firearm attack, your fire rate, your magazine size. All those are the basic things, but the one thing you need to pay attention to is the base stats, which is your critical hit rate and your critical hit damage. That will let you know whether or not you need to build your weapon into critical damage or not. If it has a lower stat, you obviously want to go into weak point more if you have better weak point stats on the weapon. And then after that, we move on to the unique ability. The unique ability for the Greg's Reverse Fate is called Shaping Destiny. On hitting an enemy, it procs bombardment on the enemy's location with a set chance, inflicts burn on enemies hit by bombardment as well. So the bombardment's trigger rate is at 20% and it has a 5-meter radius. Obviously, the more you upgrade the weapon, the more you enhance the unique ability, the more bombardment counts you will get. You start off with, I think, 3 or 4, and as you upgrade the weapon, it progressively becomes more and more. So at the max stack, you will get 7 bombardments on one hit. Remember, this is not 7 bombardments that trigger 7 times per bullet. It will trigger a bombardment. So if you have a mag size of 50 and you get lucky with RNG and trigger that 20% on every shot, that is going to be 50 bombardments times 7. So that is what makes this weapon so good for ad clearing, for clearing out mobs, and also for stacking additional damage by just shooting enemies. The additional damage that you will be getting will be 100% of your firearm attack or your firearm damage, and then you will get the additional burn, which will be 3-second burn at a 1-second interval, and the additional damage from those fire burns will be 20%. Now, I know not everyone is going to sit and crunch the numbers and become a mathematician, but what that means is essentially you will be getting an extra 120% increase in your firearm attack damage. So let's look at the build for this now. As always, on every single weapon I say this, your bread and butter will always be 3 mods: rifling reinforcement, action reaction, and fire rate up. On every single weapon, or 99% of the time, you want to have these 3 mods, because these mods automatically increase your firearm attack, which increases the damage that you can output tremendously. So whenever starting off on a weapon, you go for these 3 mods. The next mods we're going to look at is your critical mods, because this weapon does a lot of damage with crits. So obviously you're going to go to your concentration priority. This will give you an extra 47% increase in your critical hit damage. There is a downside of a minus 30% on your reload speed, but with the reload speed that the Greg's Reverse Fate has, it doesn't amount to much. You will still be reloading very fast. On top of that, we're going to add better concentration, which increases your critical hit damage by an extra 48%. So in total, you are going to be getting around nearly 100% increase in your critical hit damage as well. Paired with that, we're going to have Focus Fire. Focus Fire gives you weak point damage plus 20%, and it gives you firearm critical hit damage plus 5%. The main reason we are taking Focus Fire is because of that 5% increase in your critical hit damage. But you also have extra weak point damage. So if you do manage to proc bombardment off of a weak point hit, you will get the multiplier of the bombardment and the weak point. So it's like double stacking basically. Then you could choose between a few things, but what I like to use is concentration stabilizer. That is what gives you extra firearm critical hit damage, and it reduces your recoil so that you always hitting the shots, or you're hitting the shots where you want to hit them, especially on smaller enemies. That is amazing. Concentrate support ammo, I feel, is slowly becoming a must on most of my builds because it gives you extra magazine size, right? And it gives you firearm critical hit damage, which is amazing. You could always do, whenever you're building a weapon into crit, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your mods when it comes to that specific trait that you are going for. Apart from that, you will have the choice between two other mods. You will have 2 mod slots available to yourself, and you can do with them as you please. Because this weapon is based on fire and it stacks damage and multiplies damage with fire attributes, I go for fire conductor and fire enhancement. I don't have fire enhancement on here at the moment because it's not fully built up, but I do have fire conductor, and fire conductor says when attacking an enemy afflicted with burn, your firearm attack increases by 26%. Because every shot you are doing basically is going to afflict the burn based off your bombardments, the enemies will constantly, or 90% of the time, have the burn debuff on them, so you will be getting that extra 26% increase in your firearm attack on every single shot basically. For your last mod, again, it's all up to you. You could go fire enhancement, you could go with any other enhancement mod would do just fine, but because this weapon is built for fire, I feel like fire enhancement is going to give you the best bang for your buck. If you don't want to have fire enhancement on because you have cores now, you can roll fire attack on your cores, and you could use your last slot for something completely different. It's all up to you. You could put another extended magazine on there so you can have double extended mags, so you could have even more bullets to fire off, but it's all up to you. I usually leave 1 slot open so that people can tailor their build based off what they are fighting at the moment. If you need to get off fire conductor and you want to have chill because of the purge, now you need to have different elemental mods so that you can do the most damage possible. That will be it for the mods on the weapon. Now we need to go over to the inversion reinforcement. A lot of people are still sleeping on the inversion reinforcement. When you're going into a purge, I always say you need to always make a stop by your inversion so that you can check if you are fully kitted out for what you need to do in that activity or that specific level. My go-to would always recommend that you go for attribute, recovery, and survival. I tend to keep on heightened sensory cells because when you are near enemies, which is all the time in a purge, you will get heightened sensory cells every 0.5 seconds, and this lasts for 10 seconds, which means you will recover 20% of your max HP and your MP by 8.5%. This has a 4 times stack, right? You can recover up to 80% of your HP, and you could recover 33% of your MP just by being close to enemies. The second bit that I like to use is Vitality Burst, which means upon defeating an enemy, you apply the Vitality Burst effect. The Vitality Burst effect increases received HP recovery rate by 3.1% and shield recovery modifier by 2.1%. This is for 30 seconds and it has only 1 stack though. Remember, there is no cooldown on your recovery or your survival inversion kit. So this can be procced whenever you kill an enemy, and you will constantly have an increased HP pool, and you will have an increased modifier on your HP as well. Obviously, you could go with whatever you feel is best. I just feel very comfortable with this. It makes me feel a bit more tanky. It makes me feel I can take more shots. And it makes me feel like when I pick up a health orb, I'm getting a lot more health back. One thing that I do notice that people are always changing is the attribute. And rightfully so. You can do that because the purge encourages you to stack up the most damage you can, because you want to get through those enemy waves as fast as possible so you can get to the end, because it is time gated. But I've defaulted to having chill focus rounds on every single wave I do, and I will explain to you why. So when you're going into a purge activity, you always need to check which element the enemies are more susceptible to. In the case of when there's an electric modifier, you could put on electric mods on your weapon so you could do more damage with that. The reason why I like the chill from the inversion is that on hitting an enemy with a firearm, it grants you chill rounds, and obviously we all know that it stacks up to 5, and that is just for shooting an enemy, which you're going to be doing a lot of. On top of that, when you add max stacks, which is 5 stacks, all your attribute resistance for that enemy will go down by 20%, and it lasts for 30 seconds. But again, like I explained in the previous video, it can be reprocced. You need to shoot an enemy 5 times and it will last for 30 seconds. If it gets to 29 seconds out of that 30 seconds and you shoot another enemy just once, it will refresh the entire buff, the entire 5 stack. It will refresh. You won't have to start from stack 1 again. It will refresh completely. It doesn't have a cooldown. You will never get to 29 seconds and have to reproc it unless you are in very certain scenarios. So essentially you will be at your max stacks 99% of the time. You will have that up, which means that the enemies you are going against will always have a reduction in their resistance against attributes. What this means is that 99% of the time when shooting an enemy and when doing elemental damage, they will have 20% less resistance to that specific damage. Okay, now let's get around to why I like using chill focus rounds. We all know that each element has its own thing to it. Toxic will do dot damage, electric will electrocute, and then obviously your fire rounds will burn enemies. Chill rounds will actually freeze enemies, and in an event like Purge, I feel like being able to freeze an enemy for free is just going to be so much more helpful for your survivability, because there's been so many times where I shot an enemy and I'm low on HP and I don't realize it, but one of my shots will trigger chill focus rounds and that will freeze the enemy, which gives me enough time to actually kill the enemy, and then I can go around and look for some health orbs on the ground. So I like using chill focus rounds. Obviously you want to be able to do the most damage, but that is why you have mods on your weapon. You will always put your mods, like on the Greg's Reverse Fate, I have it for fire, so I'm still getting that fire elemental damage from my mods on my gun. But I like to keep the chill focus rounds from my inversion so that I can make sure that when I'm shooting an enemy, they would then be frozen from time to time, which gives me more time to do damage, less time to take damage, which is just a win-win all around. Now for the Descendants to use this weapon with. You could use it with any Descendant. Obviously it's not needed to use it with a certain Descendant, but there are Descendants that are going to benefit the most out of having this weapon equipped. So if you have someone like Lepic, you can use the Greg's Reverse Fate, because Lepic has good synergy with anything that is burning. And in the mid to later rounds of the Purge, you want to maximize your damage as much as possible. I wouldn't recommend using Greg's Reverse Fate on someone like Ines, because she gets more value from using something like the Secret Garden, and because you spamming her 1 all of the time, you won't have much time to shoot. So you also need to be very careful who you're using this weapon with. But any Descendant that doesn't use skill damage a lot of the time and has time to shoot, so your gun Descendant, so your people like Lepic, people like Ajax, you have Enzo, you could even use Haley as well. I wouldn't recommend using it on Haley because there are just better options on Haley, but it's not the end of the world if you decide to use Greg's Reverse Fate on Haley. You could use it on Glay, but again, the same thing like within Haley's case, Glay just benefits from using other weapons much more, and she can output more DPS with other weapons. So it's completely up to you, but most gun descendants can use the Griggs Reverse Fate, and it does really well. I've been using the Griggs Reverse Fate from level 21 all the way up to 26. Once you get to 26, that is when things start to get a bit more difficult, and you have to min-max your things. Make sure you're doing the most damage you possibly can. Make sure you have the descendant that is fit for that specific level, that can do the most damage you possibly can on it. But for those of you who are trying to get up to 26, you could use the Griggs Reverse Fate and it would do amazingly well. You could clear mobs like nothing. Okay, that is it for the video. If you have any recommendations, if I missed anything, as always, please let me know in the comments. I can address it in the comments or in another video, but I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.